And we are back, guys. It's been a while, but we are here. It's Tristan speaking, and I'm joined per usual by my boy across the pond, Dino, who's no longer sick.
I'm no longer sick. I'm finally feeling
Finally,
100% again. So I'm ready to do this.
my man fought the plague and he won, and he's here. And we haven't spoken in like maybe two, well, on Zoom at least,
Yep.
but
2 weeks.
we haven't recorded in what, like 2 weeks?
Mhm. It's been too
Yeah,
long. It's been too
it's
long.
been way too long. So I'm stoked that we got to come back with an all-time favorite of mine this week. We are talking about Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Um, really one of my all-time favorite movies. And for Dino, I believe it was a first-time watch for you.
First time ever seeing it. I was very excited
Let's
and
go.
it did not disappoint.
Let's go. All right. Well, I know last week we had brought something up, or I had brought something up. I think when we were talking about Adam Sandler working with the Safdies again, or maybe we were talking about Denzel and PTA possibly working together on PTA's next movie. But I think I'd asked you, and we never got an answer at the end. What is a director actor combo that you've not seen yet that you would love to see?
I totally forgot that we asked that question and then I remembered it again. Because it's been like 2 weeks since you asked that
Yeah.
question. But there's one that I would find very interesting, and that would be Robert Eggers and Ryan Gosling.
Ooh,
I think that
I
would
can
be
see that.
an interesting choice, him playing like a weird, maybe mythical creature or something. I think
Absolutely. I
that
could
would be
because
a
isn't Gosling doing isn't he the new werewolf or the
he
new
is.
Wolfman?
Do you know who's directing that movie?
Wait, hold on. I for sure did at one point, but I'm completely blanking right now.
Derek
Oh
Cianfrance.
yes, yeah, Derek. Yes. Yes, 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 yes,
Hmm.
yes. Place Beyond the Pines.
Yeah.
Um and Sound of Metal.
Hmm.
Great, great director. And I
He
know we
didn't do
both,
Sound
you
of
and I
Metal, though,
both
right?
love Place. Huh?
He didn't. Did he do Sound of Metal? I don't think so.
Maybe he wrote it. I think he was somehow
Oh,
he was associated with Sound of Metal. I'm pretty sure. I
was
could
he?
have made that up. I think he wrote Sound of Metal.
Did he actually? I did not know that.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he Darius Martyr, I'm sorry, was the director
But that's
of
crazy, though.
Sound
I
of
didn't
Metal,
know he
but
wrote that.
Derek did or the story. He has the story
Mhm.
credits rather. Created the story with Darius Martyr, and then
He
Darius
was making
wrote the
bangers.
actual screenplay with his brother. Um, but that's awesome because he's and how are we pronouncing last name? Ciem France or
I
T?
always
Is it
said
a hard C
it's a good
or a
question. I
soft
always said
C?
Cianfrance, but I'm really not sure.
Yeah, I don't quite know either, but he's done great stuff with Gosling already with Place Beyond the Pines. And have you seen or not Blue Velvet, Blue Valentine?
Blue Valentine, I have. Great movie.
That movie, great movie. That thing is a gut punch,
Yeah, he's
seriously.
he's been working with Gosling like 2 times. That'd be his third time.
Yeah, and I think the Wolfman
Hmm.
will be the next. And I don't know if there's anybody else that's been announced for in that cast, but I'm very excited for that. I could totally see Robert Eggers because the reason I put the two and two together is Robert Eggers is doing Nosferatu, correct?
He is, yeah, which I'm also
So
very excited about.
yeah, was he not also attached to some type of like Universal monster movie at any point or no?
I'm actually not sure. He might have been, because there was something else he announced that he was doing, but he's doing Nosferatu first. But then he said, "Oh no, I'm doing this first," and Nosferatu maybe not at all. But now he's doing
Oh,
Nosferatu. So
yeah, that's what I thought. Because isn't Willem Dafoe gonna be in it?
Willem Dafoe is going to be in it, as well as Anya. No, it's Anya Taylor-Joy didn't. She dropped out of it. It's
Oh,
Lily Rose Depp
ah,
and someone else. I think was I'm not sure who's playing Nosferatu.
I'm trying to look up some stuff right now.
Isn't it one of the Skarsgård brothers?
Oh, is it gonna be the same Alexander from the Northman, or
I'm
is it
not
gonna be
sure.
one of the others? Oh, interesting. hold on. Let me.
Mhm.
So we got Lily Rose Depp, the female lead. Oh yeah, and Bill Skarsgård, it himself.
Mhm.
Um, who's gonna play? What an obvious kind of casting choice there.
That's true.
Yeah. But
I'm
I could
excited.
totally see that. I'm super excited for that movie
Same, same.
next year. I was trying to think if I had a director actor combo that I would love to see, but I think PTA and Denzel was definitely a big one for me. But I think, do you know Christopher Abbott, that actor?
I do. Yep.
I would love to see him do something with the Safdie brothers
Well, that's interesting.
because he's very like badass, but he's also very funny and
Mhm.
he can be very serious and he's got a good like personality to him. I could see him like meshing very well like in that Safdie world.
I think
But that one
he'd be
just
great
kind of
with
came to
them.
mind. Yeah.
That's a good one.
But it's been a while. But we won't take up too much time. But in the last couple of weeks, what are some of maybe a few good movies you've checked out? What have
Mhm.
you seen recently?
I didn't watch too much because I was also like studying for my exams and stuff.
Hmm.
But I did watch The Unbearable Weight of a Massive Talent.
Oh, for the first
Have you
time?
have you seen that one?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters. I loved
Yeah.
it.
It was great. I had a great time. Nicolas Cage, great as always. Peter Pascal, so much
Uh-huh.
fun.
Were you watching it on like streaming or something, or did it just come out in over there for you?
I watched it on streaming. Like it's
Okay.
on one of the streaming services, and I've been meaning to watch it for a while. And then I decided why not finally watch it because I've seen like all the edits and things
Yeah.
like that, the memes. But a lot of fun for
Hell
sure.
yeah. That movie rules.
It was great. And then I watched something else because in the movie, Nicolas Cage is asked what's his favorite movie, and he mentions. Do you remember which one?
I'm trying to remember what he said.
The one he also watched with his daughter.
What movie was it again?
It was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Have you ever seen that one?
Yes, that is, I think, my all-time favorite silent film.
Okay. It was the first time watching for me because I've been meaning to watch more like old German movies.
Yeah,
Obviously, being from Germany, I think I have to do that.
yeah.
And yeah, it's from 1920, silent film. And it was really great, especially for that time. Because even watching it now, I was like, the set design is crazy. Like
Hmm.
everything hand drawn, it looks amazing. And like even for today's standard, you're like, wow, like that must have taken a lot of effort. And
For
sometimes
sure.
I'm like, how did they do that? And it had a great story. Did you like it when you watched it?
I I love it's there aren't many silent films truly that I really go back to or watch very often. Dr.
Mhm.
Caligari is the only one I've watched on multiple occasions. Um,
Interesting.
I feel like Tim Burton owes his entire career to that movie as well.
For
Um,
sure.
but it's so good. It's one of those that like genuinely it's like I can actually put it on like anytime and just get sucked into it, not having to have any kind of audio or anything like that to accompany it. And the somnambulist is so creepy and it's a that's an awesome movie. That's I'm super excited that you finally got to check it out.
So your favorite silent movie, you said, right?
I would say it
Okay.
probably is. I mean, there's only a couple that I think I actually look. I'm like, wow, I really, really like that.
I think it would be
But that's
number two for
number
me.
one.
I think Nosferatu is still my favorite one, but that's a close
Nosferatu is
second.
definitely up there. Did you ever see Vampire that came out in 32? Um, who
I
did that?
haven't.
Dryer, I think, did that. I don't know why I've always compared it to Nosferatu,
Mhm.
but they're not really similar. But I highly recommend that. That is a fantastic, fantastic
When did
movie.
it come out?
32. So I'm now I'm thinking that there was, but I'm almost positive it was silent. Um, but it
Interesting.
is a fantastic, fantastic um
Oh, it looks
movie.
great. It looks great. I just
It's
pulled it up and
very it's very like stylistic, um, and it kind of is pulling from that same kind of German expressionism kind of thing.
definitely gonna check it out. And then there's one more movie I just want to quickly talk about. I watched Blue Bayou.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
is it
yeah.
pronounced like that? Blue Bayou?
Blue Bayou. Yeah.
Bayou. Okay, I watched that one, which you have seen, right?
No, I haven't
No,
seen it. I know
right,
of it pretty well, and I
right.
remember researching it a lot, but I never got around to actually watch because it wasn't available for like a while, and then I kind of just lost interest.
Well, I watched it. It's directed by Justin Chon, I think his
Hmm.
name is pronounced. He's also an actor, and it was very great. And I like as I was watching it, I kept thinking like Tristan would love this movie. It's like something I think you could have made, like just visually, like shot on 60 millimeter all across like New
Yeah.
Orleans.
Uh-huh.
Very, very stylistic, and I like the story a lot. The reviews are not it. I looked up some of
Really?
the letterbox, and people are very harsh.
For what? For what reasoning?
Well, it was like because there's also a cop in the movie, and he gets a little bit of a redemption. Like he's not the asshole you think he is in the beginning, and
Okay,
people think it's like propaganda.
I
Because
see.
also about the portion, and um, there's one character who works for the government, like deporting people, and he also isn't like a big asshole. And people just said like, "Oh, it's propaganda," which
Oh, because they're
every,
not assholes?
well, I don't know because I think the problem is a lot bigger. Like, sure, the people who work there, like, they shouldn't do that, but that's their job. They're just human beings,
Right, right, right,
and
right,
it
right.
just shows that not everyone is as bad because the problem is bigger. Like, but I definitely understand some of the criticism, but people are very harsh to critique this
That's
movie.
that's interesting. That's
Yeah, which is
interesting because it
a
still has
bit
very good
sad. But
reviews, or a rating, I should say, rather.
yeah, but some of the
But
reviews, I was reading
that's
them and I
just
thought like, damn,
that's were they all like were all of the like negative reviews all kind of had the same kind of sentiment to it, like the same reasoning,
pretty much,
pretty
most of
much.
them.
I think that's like I think just at least over here, I'm sure it's worldwide, but over here, like it's just people really want to be upset by things, and
Mhm.
especially with like the stuff that is going on here, it makes sense why you would, but it's like at the end of the day, like a police officer in and of itself is not inherently an evil position or person.
Yeah.
Being someone who works at the border is not inherently evil. It's just whatever they are told to do or however they choose to act in those positions is what's bad. So it seems a
Mm,
little childish to be like, oh, they have that job. So it's like, so a teacher's a good job. I had teachers that were total dicks.
for
No one gets
sure.
mad when you see a nice teacher in a movie. You know
Mm,
what I mean? So
that's
that's really interesting though. I got to see it.
mhm. And it's a very interesting story about like this loophole that people who were adopted in the US like before the 2000s,
Uh-huh.
they weren't really American citizens, so they could be deported. So there was this whole thing, and there were a bunch of people who were deported because of that, who grew up in the US, who that's their home.
So this takes
Um,
place. Does this take place in like the 2000s?
take place in like 2000, I don't know, 16, 17, 18, wherever
Oh, so
whenever it came
it's like
out.
modern, more modern
It's
times. Oh,
modern. He
okay,
was just
okay.
adopted before the 2000s, but he's a
Oh,
grown
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
adult. And there
Okay,
was
it's
this
not like
whole
a
loophole.
period piece of like the early
No, no, no,
2000s or something.
no, no.
Got it,
It's
got it.
an issue that like that is right now, like it's happening to people.
Oh, cool.
So I
Well,
thought that,
not cool the issue, but cool that it's
yeah,
a modern movie. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And that's about everything I watched. What about
Yeah,
you?
I've been a little busier as well. The NHL, the playoffs are on for hockey over here, so I've definitely been tuning into that every night. So not as much movies, but also just being busy with work. I think last time we talked, I was really into my '90s trashy kind of sexual thrillers, erotic thrillers, or whatever. But
Mhm.
I graduated onto some more mature stuff, but also equally as unsettling, I suppose. I came
Awesome.
across this movie, which I don't know if you've heard of, and I think you might be interested in checking it out, called Exotica. Have you
I've
heard of
heard
this
about
movie?
that. Let
It came out
me.
in in '94 by this guy named Adam Egoyan, who I was not familiar with prior.
I've seen the poster before.
It's it has Elias Koteas in it. If you know
Mhm.
him, he's been in a ton of shit.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
I didn't.
but this movie
Interesting.
is really interesting. For anyone listening who isn't aware, it's a Canadian film, and it feels like a Cronenberg kind of thing, but a lot more subdued and a lot slower. And it's really, really interesting. And it's kind of, I think I've seen some people compare it to like that movie Crash, not the
Mhm.
Cronenberg Crash, well, that as well, but the other one where it's like the different stories, like the Soderbergh movie.
Mhm.
But it kind of is like that. It follows all these different people. One woman, the main lady, she works in a strip club, and Elias Koteas is like the DJ there, and he's like really in love with her, but they're not together. And then there's this other guy who comes into the strip club who's like obsessed with that woman, and they see each other every day. Like every night he goes in and gets like a private dance with her. And then there's this other guy that guy is like investigating because he's like an IRS guy who is like has his own thing. Like it's just all these different people, but they're all connected. And the way that the movie, and I'm not going to give too much away, but it's the method of the storytelling is very interesting. And I think you would really, really like this movie a lot if you can find it. It's on Criterion Channel for anyone in the States. Um, but highly recommend this. I mean, like Canadian kind of early mid '90s art house sort of thing. Um,
Looks super interesting.
it's very good, very, very good, and came out of completely like out of nowhere for me. I had never heard of it ever before.
It's on Amazon,
Um,
so I might check it out.
check that out, man. Definitely add it to the watch list at least.
Mhm.
I think
I
you would
already
really
did.
enjoy it.
It looks
Um,
very interesting. I'm
but then
intrigued.
after that, I took about a week off from movies, and I came back with a movie by Michael Haneke called The Piano Teacher. Are you familiar with The Piano Teacher?
I am. I haven't seen it, but I've definitely heard about it.
Yes. It is grim, but Michael Haneke really is just an all-time director who knows how to make a movie, and the way that he paces things really is so up my alley, and is like, every time I see it, I'm like, that is so good, but it's definitely like I can't watch. I have to watch one of his movies like once a year. Like I can't watch them very often because they're very upsetting. Um, it's a very good movie. It's on HBO Max and Criterion. For those who don't know, it stars Isabelle Huppert, who has been in a ton of stuff in the U.S. and internationally. I think a lot of people know her. She plays this piano teacher that's very like sexually repressed. She lives with her mother, who's very like domineering and controlling, and Isabelle has these very weird sexual like the way that she gets out her like sexual like angst or whatever is through very interesting means until she meets this guy who's like the first guy she's ever had any kind of like possible sexual relationship with ever. And it's very interesting the way that she approaches it, and the way that she's interested in what she's interested in is very odd. um but it's one of those movies that I know it's masterfully made. And tell me if you can relate to this, Dino. When I see a movie and I know that beyond it being a good script, beyond it being a good cast, you know it's well directed. As if it's a drama, and you can look at it a second time and see it as a comedy. And
Sure. Yeah.
I see that with movies like maybe like There Will Be Blood, where it's like, oh, this is like obviously a drama, but then I watch it again, I'm like, there's a lot of comedy going
Mhm.
on in this movie. Even something like Taxi Driver, when I rewatch it, I like
Yeah.
laugh my ass off. It is so funny. The
True.
Piano Teacher is kind of like that. It's very dark, very upsetting, and very gross, but there is a lot of comedy in there, and it's very funny. Um, and
Is
I
it like
highly recommend. Mhm.
subtly, or is
It's
it
it's in the same way that I think Taxi Driver is kind of funny,
okay?
where it's not this like he's not making jokes and slapstick, but it's
Mhm.
the nature of like
Yeah.
she's equally kind of delusional in a weird way as Travis Bickle. And
Mhm.
that in and of itself is comedic because it's like you are just so out of touch with social norms that
Mhm.
that in and of itself becomes kind of funny. Um, but there are a few gags, but it's subtle. You look, you're like, that's a comedy gag, but it's a serious moment.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
but great movie. You have to definitely be in the mood to watch it. I put it on in the middle of the day when I watched it. I have no idea why the hell I did that. Completely just soiled my afternoon,
Mhm.
but that was a big one, and that was pretty much what I watched. I rewatched No Country for Old Men. I think I mentioned it last week when we talked about Llewyn Davis. I
Awesome.
realized this is the masterpiece. This is number one. Cohen,
Okay,
this is it. It changed. This is number one. This is it.
I understand that because it's very
Yeah,
high up there for me as well. It's
yeah.
such a great movie.
I needed that rewatch. And I really fell in love with this movie. And I loved watching it before we watched Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, because I want to
Mhm.
mention it later, but I feel like there is a similar sort of vibe being thrown around both movies.
For sure.
Um, but then real quickly, just because I'm curious to know, and I won't talk about the movie because I'm sure a lot of people are familiar. And have we mentioned the movie Perfect Blue on this
We have,
pod before?
we have.
I watched it the other
Did
day.
you?
My first anime. I popped my anime cherry.
No
And you know
way.
what? I don't think I'm gonna watch any more anime. I'm gonna be real with you.
You didn't like it?
It wasn't that I minded. The story is very good,
Mhm.
but the whole time I'm like, I wish this was real people. I wish it
Mm.
was like, not that anime is not a real movie, but you know what? I wish it was like
Yeah.
live action.
Mhm.
Like to me, that the I felt that the animation almost took me out of it. Um,
Okay.
but the animation was good and all that. It's just not my thing.
Mhm. I
Um,
understand what you mean.
but the story's dope. Did you say you'd seen it
I
or
haven't.
no?
We talked about the Darren Aronofsky
Yeah,
like
the
shots he
comparisons. Yeah.
literally took out of them.
Hmm.
Did you enjoy
Uh,
those? Like, were there any more? Because I've only seen
yeah.
like two or three shots that everyone has been reposting.
There's that main one, which is a sequence of three shots. It's an overhead of the bathtub,
Mhm.
and then it cuts to the underwater of the bathtub, and then the
Yep.
third one is the same one, but she's like screaming, and
Mhm.
that's like a popular one that they compare. And then there's others, and that's from Requiem for a Dream. But then there's others like Black Swan. There's some kind of like there are some comparisons there as well because they're
Mhm.
like for visual shots and things like that. He definitely stole straight up for Requiem of a Dream. But in terms
Mhm.
of like the ethos and like the story, he definitely stole for Black Swan from this. I think he
Interesting.
said that it wasn't really, which I'm not saying stealing in a bad way, but I like
Mhm.
he clearly there was some kind of influence because there's a
Mhm.
lot in common with that movie and with shots too. With some certain
Interesting.
shots
I need
are
to
almost
watch that one
exact.
because I've been
I
meaning to for a while.
Yeah, I definitely
Interesting.
recommend it, especially since like you fuck with anime. Like you would probably really love it. Me, maybe I needed like something to kind of get me interested in the animation. Which maybe this was that movie. I thought I went into it thinking like this is gonna make me an anime fan finally. This will be a
Mhm.
5 star. I can't wait. And and I didn't rate it, not to get into the whole letterbox semantics, but not because I didn't like it, but just because I'm like, I don't think it's fair. Because I'm like, the story's like a 5 out of 5, but there's some, I don't know. I was just the animation
Interesting.
took me out. Yeah.
I'm the same way because I haven't watched a lot of anime, but I really want to. Like, I want to watch more. I want to
Hmm.
appreciate it more. Maybe this will be the one that like really gets me. I like the Ghibli movies, like I said, those are
Yeah.
great. But I
Maybe
need to
something
find
like
that.
that would work better for me too, because there's something
Oh,
about the
you've never
serious.
seen one then?
I've never seen it. This was literally my first anime in
Yeah.
general, besides Pokemon. But I don't know if I can count Pokemon. But I did
No.
watch Pokemon as a kid.
Interesting.
Um,
You need to watch a Ghibli movie.
I think maybe I should have started with that because that's
Probably.
something that maybe lends itself a little bit better to animation to warm me up
Mhm.
to it a little. Because Perfect Blue, it's not like the story lends itself to the animation. It's just
Mm.
simply a means of telling the story. Like,
Yeah, maybe a Ghibli movie or something like Akira.
so I've heard that movie's fantastic.
I
I didn't
haven't seen
realize
it
that was
myself, but
I didn't
I've
realize that
seen
was
clips
Ghibli.
though.
That is Studio Ghibli. I thought that was like the like the version of Pixar,
Yeah,
like the
Ghibli
Japanese
didn't do
version of.
Akira. That was just
Oh, they
another
didn't
one.
do it. Okay, okay, that's
No,
what I
no,
was gonna
they
say.
did.
I was like, isn't Akira kind of like an intense movie?
Yeah, I think they're doing a live action one, or like they were.
I
Taika
I remember
Waititi
hearing about that. Yes,
yeah, he
yes.
was attached, but I don't know if that's going forward. I need to watch it myself. I've only seen clips, but I think something like that or a Ghibli movie would maybe be better for you.
That's yeah, maybe. I definitely recommend this, and I want to go on the record saying like the story is fucking good. It
Mhm.
really is. Although one thing I will say, it tries to, and this isn't a spoiler, but it tries to like harness this whole thing on this twist. But it's so obvious that it's just like what is like don't try to fool. You know what I mean? So it kind of just rambles a bit, but it's like it is a great actual story. Like, and it's just
Okay,
so interesting. But
definitely gonna check it out.
but yeah, man, do you have
Mhm.
any film news or anything coming up in the down the
Mhm.
pike that we should be looking out for?
I have two things that I want to talk about just quickly.
Yeah.
There's one story, and I don't know if you heard about this. Maybe you saw it on my story. Because if this is true, this is going to be like the greatest plot twist that has ever happened in human history. Do you
Okay.
know? Do you have an idea what I'm referring to?
I'm trying to think about what I might have seen on your story in the last week or so, but I can't think of anything in
Mhm.
particular.
Well, it turns out that Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson might actually be brothers.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I saw that.
You've seen that one?
I saw that. Yeah, that's funny.
That is crazy. They're gonna do a like a DNA test soon, but there's a
Uh-huh.
high chance that they could be like literally like brothers,
Yeah,
which is
that's
crazy
so
because they look
good.
alike.
Yeah.
That is, but
Both from the
Matthew
same
McConaughey,
Are they
he
both from
he
the
totally
same part of Texas?
they are, and their mother was like his mother. Well, maybe uh the mother was in the same place as Woody Harrelson's dad, like
I
Matthew
see.
McConaughey.
Does Matthew McConaughey not know who his father is?
I think he knows because he is hesitant to do the DNA test because he's afraid of losing the father he
It,
has,
I see. I
because
see.
that might not be his actual father.
I
But
see.
Woody Harrelson said like, "Oh, you no, you're not losing one, you're gaining a new one."
Uh-huh.
But Woody Harrelson's dad, do you know who his dad is?
He was like a murderer, wasn't he?
He was part of like the group that assassinated JFK.
Yeah, he was like a hitman, right?
He was, so I don't know, but yeah, they could be brothers, which is that's crazy. Like if that's true,
Yeah,
that's the most insane thing that has ever happened.
that's absolutely well. I totally understand that from McConaughey's point of view, from
Yeah.
not wanting to be timid to wanting to do that, though. I could definitely, but I love Woody Harrelson also saying, "But you gain a dad, you gain
Mhm.
this killer as a
Yeah,
father." Like, I don't know if that's
for,
much of a gain for McConaughey
for
as much as it
sure.
is for you, Woody.
Or maybe he might have said like you're gaining a brother.
Something
Maybe
like that. I hope
yeah.
that's what he meant.
I
Yeah.
hope so too.
What else
And
is in the news?
there's another one I want to quickly talk about because Chloe Zhao's new movie,
Hmm.
the Dracula, the sci-fi Dracula movie, which
Yeah,
brings us
yeah.
back to Dracula.
Uh,
Have you heard who is like rumored to star in it?
no.
Robert Pattinson.
Oh, really? He's gonna be
He could
Dracula?
be this version of Dracula who lives in the future, which is like sci-fi. I think he lives on another planet or something, which could be interesting. I mean, he went from playing a vampire in Twilight to Batman to possibly playing Dracula, which is amazing.
Because I remember hearing about that. They're like, it's gonna be essentially like a horror western, and then they're
Yeah,
like, it's a
sci-fi.
sci-fi horror
Mhm.
western. So it's like
Yeah,
in the future or in another planet, it's sci-fi
it's
as well.
it's about Dracula in the future, and it's like this Western influence thing, which sounds amazing. I mean,
That's
sci-fi
fucking
Western
dope.
is a genre that I think there needs to be more movies because
Same with
it's a
horror western.
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Do you have here's another question that came up off the top, and maybe we'll say we'll answer it later, but really we'll just get
Mhm.
to it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite horror western or one that you've seen that you actually think is good, or can even think of one in general? Because it's really sparse. It's slim pickings for that genre.
I'm trying to think of one. Right off, like at the top of my head, I can't think of one, but I feel like I've seen one.
There aren't many that are just blatant. There is that
Yeah,
movie Ravenous, that
I
came out
haven't
in like
seen that.
'99 that had
Hmm.
like it had Guy Pearce and it had David Arquette and Blur, that band Blur from the
Hmm.
'90s.
I
Damon
do.
Albarn, he did the score for that movie, and it's so kooky, it's so
Interesting.
crazy. Great score. Um,
I'm looking at a
oh,
list.
dude, Bone Tomahawk. Did you see Bone Tomahawk?
I haven't. Should
That's
I?
I think it's Kurt Russell, so it's
Hmm.
cool. Um, it's by the dude who did Dragged Across Concrete, which I've definitely told you about before, I think,
Interesting. Yeah.
because I really love that movie.
Damn. Okay. That really looks interesting.
It's interesting. It's my least favorite of his three movies, but it's still super
Mhm.
dope. And Kurt Russell is the man always.
That's a plus. I need to
But
check that out. But
what other
that's
horror?
interesting.
What's coming up on that list?
Well, it's a movie called Gallow Walkers.
Never heard of it. Sounds
I've
cool
never
though.
heard. Starring Wesley Snipes.
Whoa, what's it called?
Gallow Walkers.
When did this come out? If it's '90s, I'll literally freak out on the pod.
2012 and has a rating of 3.6 out of 10 on IMDb.
Okay. Is it one word, two? How many words?
It's just
Oh, here it is.
Gallow Walkers
All
together.
one word. When a
2012.
when a nun broke her covenant with God to save the life of her unborn son, Aman, he was cursed for life as an adult, has killed those who have crossed him, brings him back to Vic,
Oh,
pursuing
it's a
for revenge.
zombie western.
Interesting. Yep, it's got a solid 1.7 on the old LB.
Awesome.
I can't think. I know High Plains Drifter, which is my favorite Clint Eastwood, which I might have talked about on here once.
Hmm.
That kind of gets thrown around in that world, but it's very subtle, the horror of it. But I could kind of see that as well.
We need more. Like looking at this list, we need more
It's
horror
weak.
western.
It's a very weak genre, but I understand there's not probably much of a demand for it. But I'm very excited to see how they pull off Dracula as a horror Western sci-fi. That's going
Maybe
to
that's
be
gonna be the
super
right
cool to
one.
check out. Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. Well, speaking of somewhat proto kind of Westerns, we got an awesome one, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia to talk about. But real quick, I want to say we take a quick break, refresh up, and get back here and talk about the movie.
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. All right. Well, we're back. Did you? I hope you got the bug spray for all those mosquitoes, all those flies. We're back. We're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies. I've not been this excited to talk about a movie in a while, especially for a first-time watch. But we're watching Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia from 1974, directed by Sam Peckinpah, and it stars Warren Oates and Isela Vega, as well as Gig Young and Robert Weber. Now, this is a movie I've seen many, 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 many times, and this was a first-time viewing for you, correct, Dino?
It was my first time watching it. Been on my watch list for a while ever since like you recommended it or like your fantasy football team name was inspired by it. And
Yes.
I'm very, very happy this was picked and that I got a
Well,
chance to watch it.
Well, let's go ahead and let me give the fine folks a synopsis. I hope you guys watched it. If you haven't, per usual, we're gonna spoil the shit out of it right here. So pause it, go watch the movie. It's on YouTube, correct? Didn't you watch it on YouTube?
It is on YouTube.
Yeah, go check that shit out. And it's a great movie. So pause it, come back. But the general synopsis of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, it starts with a beautiful swan in a lake. There's a young pregnant woman, just casually playing with her boobs as you do. But she's brought in, and it essentially opens with this Mexican crime lord interrogating his daughter, trying to find out who impregnated her. When he discovers that it was a man named Alfredo Garcia, he orders him to be found, killed, and for his head to be brought back to him. In return, he will pay $1 million for the head of Alfredo Garcia. Now, a couple of American kind of shady businessmen that are there when this happens, they go out and try to conduct the search in order to get that 1 million. while they're on their search, they have no luck, but they meet Benny, played by Warren Oates, who is an expat living in Mexico. He works at this like piano bar, and he plays piano there. And when they talk to him, he doesn't know Garcia, but he does know the name. And he knows because his girlfriend Alita, who's played by Isela Vega, she's a prostitute, and she kind of had a relationship slash friendship with him. So when Benny goes to talk to her, he finds out that Alfredo Garcia is actually already dead. So Benny, working for these American businessmen who are in turn, I guess, working for the Mexican crime lord, he sets out to go find Alfredo Garcia's dead body, and chopping off his head so he can bring it back. And I think he's only getting like $10,000 or something for it, if that even. But we'll get into that later. But anyway, as he goes to the grave and he finds the head, he finds that other people are on his tail trying to stop him. Some other money-hungry Mexican men who are trying to cash in on the prize, as well as Alfredo Garcia's family, who are trying to preserve his grave. But Benny, in the process, eventually loses almost everything in his journey back to the crime lord to return with the head, which ultimately culminates in this very cynical, very deadly, existential shootout with El Jefe, the Mexican crime lord, at the end of the film. Well, Dino, it was your first time, so I'm curious to know what were your initial thoughts on the movie?
Well, it was wild. And the things a man will do to get some head is crazy. Um, it was wild. I liked it a lot, especially
Mm-hmm.
like the the last half of it.
Yeah.
Especially like it just went on, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like, is this actually happening?" I didn't
Yeah.
expect it to go that route.
Yeah.
And because when I first watched it, I thought it was gonna be like, okay, bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia and a bunch of these people trying to kill him and him trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like this is not that. Like this is sort of like the weirdest love triangle I've ever seen, with one guy
Yeah.
being dead and Benny trying to get his head, and like all the shootouts, all the killing. It was glorious. It was amazing. It was so much fun to watch. Like I said, especially like the last half, it was wild. It was so crazy, and I'm so glad you recommended this movie to me.
Hell
That's
yeah.
definitely a movie that's gonna stick with me for a while. I'm gonna be
Awesome.
thinking about it.
I'd love to hear that, because it does kind of take a minute, like for it to kind of finally get to where it's sort of going.
Mhm. But that
Uh,
makes it so much more rewarding because you have
exactly.
everything before that.
Exactly. And there's some like, I don't know. I mean, and I'm curious, is this your first Sam Peckinpah movie, or have you seen
Yeah.
any of his movies prior?
First one, I wanted to watch Wild Bunch, I think it is.
Yeah, The Wild
I
Bunch.
haven't seen that one. I've been meaning to for a while. This was my first one, and I'm glad it
Awesome.
was, but it's gonna be hard to follow up because I
It,
think that's might be his best one.
it's definitely my favorite. And Sam Peckinpah himself, he did say that this Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is the only film of his that was ever released exactly as he intended, that the studio did not touch in any way, it was not altered in any way. This is the only one that literally came out 100% the way he
Thank God.
intended it to.
Thank God.
Now, it's not to say the others are bad. They didn't do like
Mhm.
a Dune job on him. Wild Bunch is a masterpiece, and I think most people would probably say the Wild Bunch is like the number one. Like,
Mhm.
even having seen Alfredo Garcia, a lot of people are like, yeah, Wild Bunch is number one. Even with studio interference, that dude made a masterpiece. It's
When I
crazy.
finally watch it, I'm gonna tell you which one I like more.
Yes, we'll have to have a
But
discussion
mhm,
whenever that does come up.
sure. But interesting to hear like your first time watching it. When was that? How did you find this movie? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the first time I saw it. It probably maybe would have been maybe 5 years ago or so.
Okay.
Um, it was probably when I had first discovered Peckinpah. I think I was probably just very much in the new Hollywood wave. You know that I'm just like a big fan of that kind of time period of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Um, So it's very heavy in that, kind of going through obviously like Scorsese and Brian De Palma and you know, Robert Altman and whoever else was kind of in that world, Coppola. And I remember the name Peckinpah kind of always being thrown around. And I knew that like Tarantino was like influenced, and Peckinpah had a pretty heavy influence in certain filmmakers today. But I can't remember even if this was the first one or if I saw The Wild Bunch first. I really can't remember, but I definitely remember being drawn to it because of the name. It's one of the greatest movie titles ever.
It is 100%.
It's one of those that like sticks out where you're like, bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia. I gotta check that out. Um, but I think that that might have been the first time, and I really wish I remember if it was my first time or not. But I remember when I did see it, it instantly hit me as like, whoa, this is like an all-time like movie for me. Um, and Warren Oates is a very underrated, and I want to get into the kind of the casting of it in a little bit, but
Mhm.
Warren Oates is. Are you familiar with Warren Oates as an actor?
I'm not.
He
I
is
was
I
before.
he is one of my favorite actors. I think he's one of the all-time great character actors.
Mhm.
And this is not normal for him to have like a leading kind of role, so to speak. But he is in the Wild Bunch. He is one of the titular Wild Bunch, one of the men in the Wild Bunch. And he's
I'm
worked
actually
with Peck.
looking where else, like what other movie he starred in. I
Yeah,
haven't seen anything.
yeah, it was a lot of that, a lot of westerns. He was in The Shooting, which I've talked about, is a western that I love.
Oh, he's in
He was
Badlands.
he's in Batman.
Badlands. Terrence
Oh,
Malick.
Badlands. Yes, yeah, he
Yeah,
plays Sissy Spacek's dad.
interesting.
Yeah. He's also in Stripes with Bill Murray.
Mhm.
He's like the dude at like the base camp. He's like the general or whatever.
Interesting.
Um, Very funny scene in that.
Mhm.
Um, but and I could go on recommending films of his that you would love. I've already mentioned The Shooting. Um, but he's like a character actor and very much was like a supporting guy who didn't get many, but what he did in this movie was essentially he played Sam Peckinpah. Like Benny is Sam Peckinpah, essentially.
Mhm.
Is kind of this guy who's been kind of driven to the fringe of society, this actor or this character who's literally been driven to Mexico. Like he left America where he's from. Because Sam Peckinpah did love Mexico and ended up spending a lot of time there, almost filming there exclusively. Was kind of pushed with this obsession, but was always kind of torn down. This obsession to make films, but always torn down by these studios, by people, torn down by addiction. Sam Peckinpah had a horrible cocaine and alcohol addiction, and was very harsh and very rough. He loved his guns. He was in, you know, the war. Like he was a photographer in the war. That's kind of what got him into this. But that character of Benny and Warren Oates is very much, and I think he said in some interviews, like when he finally got the character, he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna play Sam," um,
Poor guy.
which makes it interesting to know that character. I'm curious what you thought about Warren Oates as an actor, as someone who had never seen him before, and at this character. What you think of his acting? What do you think of this character in general, just the whole performance?
Absolutely incredible. He that is like a performance that you watch and like you remember that for a while. Like you think about that character. You don't see an actor, like you see the character. And
Hmm.
it's amazing what he does. I agree with you. Like one of I haven't like this is the only thing I've seen, but I can definitely see like why you say he's one of the most underrated actors.
Yeah,
Just seeing that, I was like, how like when this first came out, how was this guy not cast in so much more leading roles?
yeah. It's really, and that's the thing where there's so many of these great character actors, and this movie is filled with them as well. These kind of character actors, like the two American business guys, like those main dudes. One of them, the one dude, Robert Weber, he's the one I think who like elbows that chick in the face, or like that prostitute at the bar.
Mhm. Yeah.
I have no idea how that dude was not like a Marlon Brando, was not like a Paul Newman, like that dude is like a classically handsome Hollywood dude who is an amazing actor. And that dude was not in shit and never was a leading man in anything.
That's sad.
And what I actually would liken him to is that Leo, the fuck, what's his name? Leo's character in Once Upon a Time. What's his name?
Mhm.
I,
Dalton, something
yeah,
Dalton.
yeah, Rick Dalton
Rick
is
Dalton.
kind of like that. That dude who like had the chops, and War Notes could maybe be like that as well, but didn't really get the. But War Notes came a little after. But
Mhm.
Robert Webber's like that dude who didn't quite ever get that break. The only leading roles he got was like in England for like Hammer movies and like Italian films. Like
Mhm.
he had the same trajectory. Like you look at Rick Dalton, that's what Robert Webber was. So you
Interesting.
could almost look at it like that Rick Dalton for any of you Tarantino stands listening. Rick Dalton playing one of those businessmen is kind of what that was. But the other guy, Gig Young, is interesting. Did you do any research on him, or have you ever heard of Gig Young?
I have not.
He's in a movie that I mentioned on one of the first episodes called "They Shoot Horses, Don't They?" I don't know if you remember me
Mhm.
mentioning that, but he's in that movie.
I do.
But and that came out maybe 5 years before this. But a couple years after this movie came out, Gig Young passed away,
Mhm.
and he had killed himself, but not before murdering his own wife, who he was married to for maybe a couple months or a couple weeks at the time.
Oh shit.
Murders her in his own home, and then kills himself out of nowhere with no note or anything. Um, but it was
So
a
they don't
very
know why?
no idea why. They have no idea why.
Holy shit.
But he just snapped, murdered his fucking wife, and then killed himself. Um, and that was like maybe 2 years, I think, after this movie came out, 2, 3 years. It was very shortly after. This was one of the few last sort of roles that he had,
That's
um,
grim.
which is very grim. And he's a very grim kind of character in this too. Like him in particular, he seems a little like a little more unhinged, like with his face, and especially
Mhm.
when he pulls out like that machine gun from his jacket. Um,
He was the one that got shot first.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Which
Okay.
I have a question for you. I remember
Mhm.
reading this once, but I had kind of forgotten about it. But on this viewing, it popped back in my head because I remember thinking it.
Mhm.
Did you have any kind of vibe, any kind of like homoerotic vibe between those dudes?
For sure. When he
They
got
were
shot,
fucking,
it's like,
right? Those dudes were for sure fucking.
was his name Mark or what was it?
The one dude, the one who got shot first is Frank, Frank C.
Frank.
Dobbs.
Frank. And he's like, Frank, are you okay? So he
Yeah.
goes to him, he gets shot. And instead
Yeah.
of like shooting back, he turns to Frank and like tries to walk to him and then falls down. And like I
Yes.
think he says something to him.
He says something, and then he's like, when Benny's like, "Is he okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's okay." And then he just pulls out his gun and gets fucking whacked.
For sure. For
But
sure. There's
I,
definitely something between those two.
they were for sure touching each other on those long car rides for sure. But especially on this view, and I was like, damn. I was like, that was like that scene in particular is very blatant,
Mhm.
um, and obvious. But there's which I never caught because I haven't seen this movie. I know of it, but the character of Frank C. Dobbs, that name is a name of a very famous character from another film. Were you familiar with that name?
I'm not sure. I don't think
It
so.
is Humphrey Bogart's character's name in Treasure of the Sierra Madre,
Oh, I haven't seen that.
which I haven't seen either, but is a big influential film that on Paul Thomas Anderson for There Will Be Blood. He like cited that movie as one of those, but also on Sam Peckinpah, one of his all-time favorite movies ever. And and the character he didn't have a name, but he's like, oh, you're gonna be Frank C. Dobbs, and that is the name from from Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
That's cool. Okay.
Um, but I really love this movie, and you know, I think this is a really good representation of Sam Peckinpah
Mhm.
too. And I saw a review on Letterboxd that kind of sort of talked sort of about this, but it's there's something about the gunk in between their teeth that you see, the literal dirt you see in between their fingernails, the fucking spazzy, like there's, which in my latest quote unquote, for the people listening, I'm just doing the quote marks, review on Letterboxd. There's
Mhm.
a moment in this film that I really love, and I'm gonna ask you your favorite moment in a sec, but
Mhm.
there's a moment where Warren notes after I think it's when Alfredo Garcia's family comes and he like kicks them out when he's at like the watering hole. He's like, get out of here, god damn it, you motherfucker, god damn. And he's like stuttering and he's kind of like sputtering, like he can't really form a grasp. Like he's just angry, but he can't really grasp onto what.
Mhm.
Um, and it's all of those things combined. That gunk in your teeth, that dirt under your fingernails, those spasmodic kind of moments you have where you're angry but you don't know how. All those things together, I think, is what encompasses a Sam Peckinpah movie. And I think that this might be the movie that encompasses it the best. Um, and to use that as like a to lead in is, what moment do you think like stood out to you the most as maybe the most effective moment, or your favorite, the most intense? Like, what was like the most bold moment for you? Like, whoa, this was like it for me in this movie.
There were a lot of great scenes. Like I could talk about my favorite scenes forever. There are a couple of notes I wrote down, but I'm gonna get to those later. Um, One scene I really liked is at the end where he's like, "Take the money and go," like the 1 million. He's like, he tells him how many people have died
Yeah,
because of that head, and like he's like, and one of them was my friend or like my girlfriend or whatever, wife, and he just shoots him. Like that scene was very great, stood out, and the ending as well, where he's like tries to drive away and he just gets like absolutely obliterated.
yeah.
But there are so many great scenes.
Which that scene, it kind of reminds me of the ending of Bonnie and Clyde.
Mhm,
The final scene, they kind of, they are the same. I think Bonnie and Clyde has the same like close up shot of like
mhm.
that gun, like that final shot of
And then the
Alfredo
final shot is
Garcia,
like just the barrel of the gun, right?
just the barrel. I think they did that in Bonnie and
So
Clyde as well, because Peckinpah loved that movie. Um,
maybe.
yeah.
And
Also
the other
ended with a
scene,
freeze frame. Movie ended with another freeze frame.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And I like the shootout scene where those two that we talked about, where those two characters, the two Americans come in and they
Hmm.
shoot everyone except the old guy.
I
They
love
don't,
that.
they don't kill him. That was also
He's just stayed in the.
that was also a very great scene. What about
I,
you?
there's so many. The most iconic, I think, for me is when he's tracking down the dudes who like killed his girl and knocked him
Mhm,
out and took the head. When he sees them broken down and he like slides in there and he kills them.
mhm.
And then one of the greatest, one of my all-time favorite moments, it was my profile picture, like this still forever. I think it was my draft, my not draft, the fantasy team photo, is
It
where he's
was.
standing there looking down with a gun, and he just says, why? He goes, because it feels so goddamn good. And he shoots him again, even though he's dead, and just walks away. And it's one of my favorite scenes ever in anything ever. Um, I
Great
love
scene.
I love that scene. That's another just good. I mean, I'm curious to know, like, what did you pick up from this movie about Sam Peckinpah, if anything? Like, was there anything that stood out, or like that you're like, whoa, like this guy's clearly dealing with this, or he really likes violence, or he loves tits? Like,
Well, he doesn't make things pretty. Like he shows the like harsh reality and how cruel and like disgusting human beings can be. Like he doesn't brush over that. Like his characters, the one he makes, like a lot of them are they're just disgusting human beings.
yeah.
And like society as a whole, like as you mentioned, I think he has a hate for like a lot of things.
Yeah.
And he at least he makes something like good of it. It's not just like hate, oh, like life has beaten me like down and things
Yeah.
like that. He uses that to make something like this amazing movie, which I think is great. He's definitely dealing with a lot of like he has dealt with like a lot of relationship stuff and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, Especially the girlfriend, like the she becomes his wife.
Yeah.
That was well when those two characters come in, like the one who tries to rape her, and then
Very weird scene. Let's get into that in a minute. But yeah, weird
he
scene.
walks, yeah. Okay, we get into it in a minute. That was like I was like, whoa, like who hurt you, Sam? Like what happened in your life? Like how did damn.
Yeah. that that was Chris Christopherson. Um, Great actor and singer. Which I saw you had watched The Star Is Born recently. Was that you, or am I mixing up with someone
I
else?
did watch that for the first time.
He was in one of the earlier adaptations as that character Bradley Cooper plays.
Interesting.
But
Which
that scene
also
is,
very dark.
yeah,
Dark.
but that scene is fucking weird. And
Hmm.
I think if there is, like, this is like a, for me, one of my all-time favorites. If there
Hmm.
is a part of the movie that I kind of wish was not there, it is that. And
Same.
not from this the point of view of like I'm very like offended or that shouldn't be, like, if it's something that has to do with the story and the character and it's necessary, then
Hmm.
by all means do it. Don't be reckless, don't be tasteless with doing this, because this is a heavy thing. But
Hmm.
this just, I didn't think there was any stakes. I didn't really understand the point. And to this day, I never understand the point of that like 10-minute like whole sequence. It's very odd.
Same. I think it was like what I thought when I see, because I was thinking like, what is the purpose of this? I think it was just to show like the girl, like the girlfriend, wife, whatever, that she's not faithful and she'll
Yeah.
use that opportunity. But it was so weird. That was like, you surely could have made it clear with something else.
Yeah, it's very, it's weird that, to me, when if I would have seen that, I would have been like, oh, that's something that maybe the studio, there probably was more to it. But the fact that Sam's like, no, this is the movie that was untouched, that's where I'm like, oh, you chose, like, you really chose and wanted that like in there. I'm like, that's an odd choice.
For
Um,
sure.
but that's a weird. Was there anything else about Peckinpah that maybe makes you excited to check out more of his movies? Like anything in particular, like about him or about the movie, that makes you more curious to check out more of his movies? Because he really might be one of the most interesting figures of that time period in terms of directors.
For sure. I think the whole movie makes me excited to watch more of
Yeah.
his filmography because it's
Yeah.
very unique and it's very interesting. Um, his main character, Benny, he's a very cool character,
Yeah.
like very interesting one,
Love the
and
sunglasses never leave his face,
such an
even when
iconic
he
one.
sleeps. Yeah.
So iconic. Like I said, the whole movie, like everything about it makes me excited to watch more of his movies and see what else I like.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
you?
I mean, I'm just so familiar, but like this is a great starting point, I think, because it encapsulates everything that he does. There's other movies, like I would definitely recommend The Wild Bunch and definitely recommend Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman. I think you would really like that as well. But which they remade and with James Marsden and somebody else in like 2010 or something like that. Very shittily remade it. But
For sure.
it's just Sam Peckinpah deals with a lot of masculinity issues, questioning that. He deals with
Mhm.
a lot of violence, like what it means to be a man, if there is such a thing, or at least dealing with what it used to mean to be a man, a tough
Mhm.
man. And also I feel like his movies always deal with people who are like, they're in the face of a changing time and a changing era and
Mhm.
something that they're no longer in control of, which is what the new Hollywood was like. And that's very much like what the Wild Bunch is about. It's about the old Westerns are no longer like, this is about to be a new era of filmmaking and just in general in life. Like that's the ever changing tide of that. And I don't know. It's always violent. There's always a lot of the slow motion cuts too, which I love the way that he edits. Sam Peckinpah, the way that he cuts his films is incredible, especially those action sequences. But our boy, I don't know if we're calling him our boy, but we've watched his film. He's a Literally Me alum, Mel Gibson. He's
Mhm.
been trying to remake The Wild Bunch for many years, and he is a disciple of Sam Peckinpah's.
Really?
Yes, he is a huge fan.
So he's trying to, has it been like, it has been
It
announced, but
it's
have
been
they,
announced for years that he's been doing it,
but they've
that he's been
never
trying to.
started like casting or
I
pre-production?
think that they've casted, people have fallen in, people have fallen out,
Mm,
COVID has happened, financing has happened. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's just in that limbo, but he's been trying to do it for years.
You think he'll ever be able to make it?
I think so. I really think so. I thought it was gonna. I thought they were saying like it's happening. It'll be his next one, but then
Mhm.
he announced the Passion of the Christ 2, and I was like, oh, damn, that's okay.
That's
So
right. He's doing that.
yes, so I think it's that instead. Um, but I'm curious to know just kind of your final thoughts on the movie as a first time viewing.
Mhm.
Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Would you recommend it to other people? Who would you recommend it to for fans of? Like, what are just your final thoughts on it?
For sure.
Would you
Because
watch it again?
before I do that, I'm just want to talk about like two more scenes.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the scene where like the crime boss says like, "Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia," and you see all the cars just driving out.
Yes,
That
yes.
was also great.
Dope.
And there's another scene that I wanted to ask you a question about because you
Okay.
know more about the behind the scenes stuff. There's a scene where he's in the bed with his girlfriend or wife,
Yeah.
whatever, and he jumps out and he like she falls with him.
Hilarious scene.
So hilarious. Was that on purpose or was that
I I
because
don't
it looks
know.
an accident?
It does look very accidental, and I don't think it was. If I had to guess, I think it was just a natural occurrence of what happened.
Okay, because I was
Um,
laughing a lot.
it's a great. This is another movie. A lot of comedy. All
Mhm.
this is a fucking funny movie. This is a very funny movie.
When the kid asks him like what's in
Mucha
his car,
moscas.
a dead cat, like that's
Yeah,
his
cat,
used to
dead cat.
tell a little kid.
I
That was
love
funny.
that. This is yeah. Did you have a favorite comedic moment? Was it one of those too?
When she fell down, that was I don't know why I feel sorry for her. That was like
Yeah.
an accident, but it looked
Yeah.
so funny. Just
And she looks
her
like she's
like
having a great time too. She's like
she
laughing
laughed
the whole time.
afterwards. She laughed afterwards, so for sure. But to your previous question, um, it was a great movie. I would recommend it to like everyone who loves a good Western movie
Hmm.
for sure, and people who love violence, like whoever likes like action movies, but with like a gut punching story to it,
Yeah.
for sure. And I'd
And
recommend it to a lot of people, honestly.
that's you bring up a good point too that I kind of want to talk about briefly is that it's kind of like that I almost said gender fluid, this genre fluid thing where it is like a western but like a neo western kind of thriller,
Mhm.
like kind of crime action movie. Like it's really interesting the way that he kind of bends the genre of a western like in like a more modern day, you know.
Mhm.
And I feel like, and I mentioned it earlier, but I feel like the only other movie that I can kind of liken it to that kind of blends that genre is something like No Country for Old Men.
For sure.
I think that that movie kind of has a very similar tone that also is like a Western, but it's like modern and it is a Western, but they're in cars and not horses, which kind of takes you out of it, like of the, takes it out of the classic Western, whatever. So that's
Neo Western.
exactly. So that's really interesting. I like that a lot. Um, but I'm curious to know if this film was made today or
Mhm.
if they were remaking it today, who would be behind the movie, directing it, and who would be the star? Who'd be playing Benny?
I don't have a director, but there's someone
Okay.
for Benny. Like as I was watching it, there was one person I was like, oh, like he could if there ever were to remake it. Do you know Tony Dalton?
Tony Dalton?
Tony Dalton. He was in Better Call Saul. He was in the Hawkeye series. Look him up.
I'm going to look him up because I know that name from something that sounds like a character's name. Tony Dalton. Let me find.
Does he plays Lalo Salamanca in
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Better Call Saul? He'd be
Yes.
perfect for Benny, or potentially. Now, hear me out. Maybe someone could make a movie about Alfredo Garcia. And
Yo, you got
I
to take this
thought,
off the pod, Dino. Don't let out the gold.
because I was thinking about like you could just have a movie that just shows who Alfredo Garcia was, because
That's
he probably wasn't a good person. I mean, he
yeah,
slept with a lot of people. He had relationships with people who were in relationships, who had husbands. He slept with an underage child. Things
yeah.
like that. I think Tony Dalton would be perfect for it because he brings this charm. Because I think Alfredo Garcia was also a very charming person,
Yeah.
good with ladies, and I think Tony Dalton, he could play Benny, but as well as maybe Alfredo Garcia in a spin-off movie about him.
Interesting. That's a really good take because you don't know anything really about him.
You
You,
don't.
all you see is one photo. There's no
Mhm,
scene with him. And one interesting thing, which I didn't catch until this viewing, and when I was watching some like listening to some interviews, when they're talking about Garcia to Benny, like when they're
mhm.
showing him the photo, did you catch this? In the audio track, you hear a car crash happening, and then you find out later that Alfredo Garcia dies in a car accident because he was drunk driving. But during that whole scene, there was a whole like you hear a car like rumbling and driving, and then it crashes like you're and crashes
So he
during that
died
whole scene.
while they were looking for him.
I get, or it's just kind of, I don't even know if it's supposed to be literally outside or anything. It's just like they just threw it in there. They're like, yeah, this guy's dead. Like,
Interesting. I didn't catch
yeah,
that. I think I'll rewatch that scene to hear if I.
yeah, it's very
Interesting.
cool. That's a great casting and a great
Mhm,
idea to kind of flip it on its head
mhm.
that idea and go for the Alfredo Garcia. No pun intended.
For sure. But you have something.
I do, and I told you that I've been interested, and again, this is all talk, so who knows if it ever happens. But I've never, if I was to ever remake something, I would love to remake this movie, like
Hell yeah.
not shot
Hell
for
yeah.
shot or anything. Maybe even bring me like an Alfredo Garcia spinoff, like of Alfredo Garcia. Who knows? Got my boy
Mhm.
got the script already. Um,
I'm writing it
but
as we
I've
speak.
I've thought about it for a long time, and I almost don't. I almost want to just tell you off pod what my
Mhm.
actual idea is because when we were talking about the movie, I actually thought of a different version. So I'm going to share that one, and I'm going to tell you my other one off the pot. So sorry, folks, you're not going to hear that one. Maybe
That's
I'll
exclusive.
drop one, but that might be exclusive. But
Mhm,
I was just thinking now, which I thought of director, and maybe it's because I just watched it recently, but obviously the comparison of No Country for Old Men, I was like, I could see a modern remake or something by the Coen brothers
mm,
of this movie, especially because there is a lot of comedy in this movie, and the Coens obviously are very funny dudes,
for sure.
and have that good mix of comedy and seriousness in their films. So I was
That's a
like,
great,
that
great
could
one.
be it.
Mhm,
Now, the one that I just thought of though, um, I think could be interesting, or it could be terrible because I just thought of it 2 seconds ago.
mhm.
But I think reversing it instead of an expat in like in a border town in Mexico, it is a Mexican immigrant who has gone to a border town in like Texas or in America. And I know he's not Mexican, but he's Latin and can play
Mhm.
Pedro Pascal as Benny flipped, but he's in Texas now instead of an American in Mexico. We have a Latin man in America in a flipped version.
That's amazing. I want to see that. He'd be perfect.
I think he could be good too because he can be serious. He's funny. He's got
Mhm.
that charm to him like Benny does. But I feel like Pedro could really get gritty
Interesting. Oh, that I didn't even think about that, but that's perfect.
because he's the Mandalorian, correct?
He is.
He's got that kind of intensity to him, that mystery too as well. But
Mhm.
I was just like, yeah, I was like, I think that that could be kind of cool. But like I
And the
said, the
brutality. If
huh?
you've seen The Last of Us, like
I haven't seen
he
The Last of Us.
he is brutal. Like Joel is a very brutal character. Like he kills a bunch of people, so he can bring that to the table as well.
I gotta watch Last of Us, but
For sure.
that's mine. Like I said, I'll tell you the real one off pod.
Mhm,
Well, and then another thing that I want to ask Dino before
mhm.
we get into how much we think we are literally Benny, um, are there any other movies maybe that came to mind that you could see like pairing well with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia as a double feature, or
Mhm.
any other movies you think are similar to this that maybe this reminded you of?
I think the one you already mentioned, No Country for Old Men,
Hmm.
fits perfectly with it, but I'm trying to think of another. I think there are a lot of neo-Western that you could pair it with, but I feel like there's something in my head that you could. like put on as a double feature, but I'm drawing a blank right now.
I
Do
feel
you have?
like I do have one that I thought of after this last viewing,
Mhm.
which is another favorite of mine, which I hope makes an appearance on this pod one day, and that's The Long Goodbye, which I don't think you've seen, but I know we've talked about it before, just like personally, you and I.
I
Um,
haven't. It's been on my watch list as well for a long time.
that's another one that it's like neck and neck. These movies are equal to me.
Mhm.
But I noticed on this viewing that Benny and the character that Elliot Gould plays in that movie are very kind of similar, almost this born loser-ish kind of thing. And there's a
Mhm.
scene where Benny says, like, remember when he's talking to the dudes for the first time and they're like, which is very funny when he's like, well, I need $2,000 up front for expenses. And the guy's
Mhm.
like, give him $200 or something like that. And it's just
Yep.
so funny. Um, but there's a moment in there where the guy like essentially calls him a loser, and Benny's like, "Can't lose every time" or something like that. He
Mhm.
says. But there's a very similar moment in The Long Goodbye that I was like, "Damn!" I was like, those kind of go well together. But I would like to see those two together as a double feature,
Interesting. Need to
as
check that
well
out.
as well as No Country. I think No Country for
Mhm.
sure.
I think that fits perfectly as well. Like what you said, the Coen brothers, they could really remake this or like make a modern version for sure.
100%. Well, Benny or not Benny Dino, on a scale
Literally
of
me already.
I know. On a scale of 1 to 10 heads, how much are you literally Benny, or is Benny literally you?
That's such a tough one. I should have thought about that beforehand.
Yeah.
That is a tough one. Because on one hand, I don't want to be like Benny,
Hmm.
but on the other side, he is kind of like he's not that bad. The people
He's
around him
not.
are much worse.
Yes.
So I'd probably give him like a 4.5, maybe a 5,
I think that's fair.
something like that.
I think that
How
that's
about
fair.
you?
I think I think I would maybe because he's very, let's see, Benny is very determined.
Hmm.
That's for sure. He's stopping at nothing. But also with Benny, he's someone who very much cherishes his relationships.
Hmm.
He
Maybe a bit
obviously,
too much.
yeah,
I think he
definitely.
like closes a couple eyes. Like he's just like he turns blind for the person and ignores a lot of red flags.
I would agree.
Hmm.
But even like look at the head, like he builds a great relationship with the head. Like they're buddies on
For
the thing,
sure.
and that's what's cool
Giving a
because
shower.
yeah, give him a shower. When he's
Hmm.
thirsty, he pours vodka all over him.
It was like that was
Uh,
another great scene where
great
he
scene.
pours vodka on his
Thirsty, have a
private
drink,
part.
pal. Yeah,
Hmm.
awesome scene.
I mean, when he pours it in his pants.
Oh, in his pants too. Yes, when she clearly has like pubic lice or like
Mhm.
bed bugs or something. He's
Very
just
funny scene.
so
It just
good. I feel like that was taken out of Peckinpah's real life. I feel like that actually happened to him.
could
But
be, could
um,
be.
but on the downside, I will say Benny is maybe a little reckless and also rather violent and maybe morally questionable. So I think
Mhm.
I'd have to go with only five
Head.
heads as well, maybe six because he really is endearing and I do love him a lot. But I think 5 to 6 heads is about fair for me as well.
Mhm. Makes sense.
Um,
There's another thing
yeah,
because our podcast is filled with funny coincidences. We have this magical aspect. There's another coincidence.
what's that?
So one of our listeners, Mark,
Uh
who's
huh.
been listening to every episode, every
Yes,
time we
sir.
upload one, he messages me and talks about it. Great guy. Shout out to you, Mark.
Hell yeah. So he's checking out all the movies each week.
He does. He listens to every episode.
Hell yeah.
Him and a couple others. Shout out to Flo, Roop,
Shout
also, and
out.
Anna. They're
Shout
listening to every
out.
episode. But Mark, because I saw the movie and I posted it on my Instagram as I usually do, the letterbox thing, and I told everyone we're gonna talk about this movie in the next podcast. Turns out next Wednesday, which is gonna be the day this comes out.
Uh huh.
So if you're listening to this on the first day, it's Wednesday. It plays in his movie theater, and he's gonna watch it.
Fuck yes.
So the day it releases, he's gonna be there. It's his birthday also. So if you're listening to this, Mark,
Happy birthday, homie.
today, as you're listening to this, happy birthday.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
he's gonna watch this movie.
That's so dope. Where's
And
he
then
located? Where's
he's
this playing?
in England. I think he's in London.
Well, lucky him. That
Yeah,
to see that on a big screen is going to be very dope, especially for
for
a
sure.
first time viewing on a big screen. Very
He's seen it
jealous.
before. He's seen it
Oh, he has seen it.
before.
Okay, he has seen it.
He's seen
Okay,
it before, but he's gonna watch it in theater on his birthday and come
so
back. And
dope.
here we have an episode ready. So
Yes, sir. Well, Mark, I hope you saw it on the big screen. I'm curious to know. Right in. Let us know how it
mhm.
looked, how the print looked. Was it print? Is it a film print? I gotta know all the details. Let us know, please.
Let us know, Mark.
Um, that's super dope though.
Mhm. So I
That's
wanted
super cool.
to mention that.
That's super cool. Well, we've come to that point where, per usual, we're gonna pick next week's movie. This week was or this past movie was mine, so this week it will be Dino. We'll be picking from his list. So Dino, you're gonna spin that wheel. And for those who are new to the pod or just forgot or whatever, every week we each come with a list of 20 movies that we are updating or changing maybe throughout. And each week one of us picks a random movie from that list from a random number generator. And this week it's from Dino's list.
Mhm.
Dino, I want you to spin that thing. Let me know what number, and I'm gonna tell you what we're watching next week.
Let's go. And the number is 18.
18.
Mhm.
Let's go.
Which one is it?
One of my favorite John Carpenter movies, They Live.
Let's go. Perfect. Perfect. I'm
Hell
excited to
yes.
rewatch it. It's my
Oh,
favorite Carpenter.
yeah. Oh, is it really number one?
It is with Dark Star, which is also on my list.
Hot take. That's a hot take. That's your number one, Dark Star,
With
with They Live.
they probably share the number one spot. I have
Damn.
such a soft spot for Dark Star. Have you seen it?
Damn. I have seen it.
Okay, I think it's on my list as well, so
It
maybe it'll
is.
come
It
up.
is.
I'm excited to rewatch that one, and now They Live, which is going to be a great episode. I'm
Oh
excited.
man. I love They Live.
So
Folks, if
iconic.
so iconic, folks. If you're not familiar with the movie, I guarantee you are without even knowing it. The clothing company Obey, which is very popular and huge, their whole thing was spawned from that movie.
Mhm.
Shepard Fairey made that famous Obama poster, the
Yeah.
hope for all you in the States. Even if you're not from the States, I'm sure you know it.
Alien
Um,
design is so iconic. Like you've seen it
you've
somewhere
seen it.
for
Shepard
sure.
Fairey is an icon, and this movie is very dope.
Mhm.
Have you seen this a whole bunch?
I've seen it 3 times.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I
I
think
think
it'll
I'm
be my
about.
third or fourth time. I'm gonna order the Blu-ray specifically for that because I've been meaning to for a while, and I put it on the list. And I said if it comes up, I'm just gonna go ahead and order it. So that's what I'm gonna do.
I'm gonna look up what the They Live Blu-ray, what we got working right now. What do we have on the market here?
Mhm.
Because I'm down with They Live, and I don't own it. I think at all. So I would love to get
Good,
that
right.
on
It's one of
Blu-ray.
my favorite movies, so I need to own it.
Oh, Shout Factory put out a crazy ultra high def. That's probably only a North American thing, though, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and sold out immediately, of course. But Amazon looks like Amazon does have.
There's even a collector's edition, but it's $30.
Yeah, I'm looking at that one right now. The one with, yeah, the collector's edition.
Hmm.
4K. There is another 4K ultra high def though that is on Amazon, at least in America.
Here as well, but it's also like $28. I think I'm
Yeah,
gonna
this one.
stick with the
Oh, this
normal
one's.
one on my
Yeah,
budget.
yeah. This one here. Oh, this one's only 20. That's the thing. It's got to be loaded up with bonus features for me to really pull a trigger on
Mhm.
something like that.
For sure.
Or it's got to be like an all-time movie. Which, by the way, this is kind of off topic, but have you seen Criterion? Have we already talked about this? Criterion is dropping After Hours. They
We
finally
haven't.
announced it. Did we
We
talk about
haven't.
that? Fuck, we should have
No.
brought that in the news. We'll bring that up in the news because they were announcing and dropping a lot of awesome shit soon.
Mhm.
We'll talk some physical stuff. I don't think we've done that on the pod yet. So
We
maybe
haven't.
next week we'll talk some physical stuff.
I
See
still
what's
haven't seen After Hours before, so
fuck. Well, it's on the list for sure. So
it's
I
on the
hope
list.
mine
Okay,
comes up. Yeah.
because I've been
Um.
meaning to watch it with my girlfriend, because she's a very big The Weeknd fan, and like we talked about like
Hmm.
previous episode, he
Yep.
dedicated a whole album, as you told me.
Yeah. Pretty
So
much
I
name the
told her
whole.
like
Yeah.
we're gonna watch the movie and we're gonna listen to the whole album afterwards. That's
Yeah.
the date idea I had, so I'm gonna
Hell
watch it
yeah.
soon. I'm gonna watch it soon for sure.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm so excited to check out They Live again.
Mhm.
Folks, if you're following along with us and watching these movies before watching then or before listening, well, first off, thank you. But if you want to check in with They Live, I'm gonna see where it's available. I mean, you can rent it pretty much everywhere. In terms of streaming, I don't think it's currently streaming anywhere
It
in
was a
America.
movie for a while,
Okay.
but I don't think that it is anymore.
Wow, I have not watched this movie, I guess, within the last like 3 years since I've had a letterbox, I guess, because I've not logged it.
Interesting. Well, it's also available to rent on Amazon and
Yeah.
Apple.
Amazon,
So,
Apple, all that good
mhm,
stuff, you can get it.
for
Um,
sure.
man, I'm excited. Another great episode in the can. I'm excited we got to finally talk Alfredo Garcia. Um, and I'm stoked that you finally got to check out some Peckinpah uh,
Finally,
as
and
well.
a bunch more coming.
Yes, a bunch more. Um, Maybe I'll add some more to the list. Who knows? We got to replace that Alfredo Garcia spot. Who knows?
That's right. That's right.
But anyway, thanks guys for listening, per usual. And Dino, as always, favorite part of the week talking to you. So I'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Such a pleasure, man. Take care.
All right.
Bye.